Welcome to another episode of Close Mode, the Enterprise Sales Show. I'm Brian Dietmeye, CEO of Close Strong. And today I'm really fortunate to be here with Brett Pavony, who's VP of Sales at Rev. And for those of you who don't know, Rev provides 99% accurate transcripts, captions, and subtitles. It's a pretty cool company. Welcome to the show, Brett.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, we were chatting last week, and you brought up something that I really like and kind of drives me crazy, and it was like check-ins of us to reps on deals, and then to customers checking in on deals, and I did a little work on the subject and was reading this blog where they were talking about like the car ride where the kids are like, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" And I feel like there's a lot of that happens. So, and I also stumbled, I don't know, Brett, if you've heard about this, but I stumbled on this article about intelligent repetition. Is it well thought out? Is it value add, both the method, what we're doing, and the timing when we do it? So let's start with that. Do you think, as we're checking in with reps on deal status, that we're at the level of intelligent repetitions with them yet?
Yeah, I think it's a good topic, a good time to chat about this topic too. Unlike the kids car, you can ask your rep like, "Hey, that email that you're about to send, or that email that you sent that says, hey, have you looked at the contract? What's the status?"
Yeah.
You can ask your rep, like, how would they respond to that?
Right.
Like, would they respond to you? And so I think like we're not there yet, in my humble opinion, but the best reps are there, and I think there's an opportunity for the best reps to continue to feed the folks that are on their team that are maybe junior or newer or new to the industry to really lean in and teach them some of those best methods and practices.
Yeah. And what do those look like? What are your best reps doing?
I think as cheesy or corny as it sounds, like it all goes back to that first phone call you have with Mr. Customer or Mrs. Customer. I think it comes down to really good discovery,
Yeah.
right? So if you have a plan and you know who your champion is, your economic buyer, the whole dynamic and makeup of the buying committee, you're going to have a lot more opportunities to go and grab some knowledge that you have and push it over the line via email or text or whatever it may be. And so I think if you find yourself in a position where you're about to send out an email that's not adding any value, that's just a status check-in, you probably didn't do your homework.
Yeah.
And you got to go revisit that business plan, maybe backtrack and do a little bit more digging.
Yeah. No, I think that just that simple notion of stop before you said that, like, is this helping? Is this adding any value? I've been fortunate to talk to a lot of sales leaders like yourself lately, and a couple of them have brought up sequencing that comes from sales tech and saying like they can tell when they're being sequenced. And I think it fits in the topic we're talking about. What are your thoughts on kind of sales tech sequencing?
Yeah, we use MEDDIC or MEDDIC. I've used that at most of the organizations I've been at after being exposed to it earlier in my career. I think it works well. I don't bang the drum probably as loud as I should to make sure that everyone's doing it all the time. But there are tools today, and we just rolled one out that'll help you with some of the manual admin work. Like for instance, a company called Attention Tech. They integrate really well with Salesforce. They'll basically fill out the boxes for MEDDIC or MEDDIC or whatever your sales flavor formula is. They'll go ahead and do that for you. And so there are tools out there. I think the question is like, does your company have the right tools for your sales team and for your product and your motion? And then if the answer is yes, then the next question is your sales enablement function or your RevOps function, are they, enabling and empowering your sales team to make sure that they're using it to ultimately fulfill the goal of satisfying customers' needs and checking all the check boxes on something like MEDDIC. So I'm a fan of what's out there right now.
Yeah.
A lot of options, but you got to make sure you choose the right one.
Yeah, this is somewhat off topic, but related. So you bring up something about like that I often struggle with, and I know a lot of leaders I talk to struggle with. You've got something like MEDDIC, and there's that volunteer army, and then there's legislating. Everyone has to use it, and everybody seems to be struggling with. I get the notion that if it doesn't add value to the rep, they shouldn't do it, but I feel like there's a certain amount of legislation that has to happen. And what are your thoughts on that? How do you get something like that instituted?
Legislation around implementing a technology tool?
Like you need to use it, or is it volunteer army? Hey, people will look at it, and if it helps them, they use it.
Look, I think to flip the table on us as the customer, like when technology tools are pitching us as sales leaders on the value of their tool, if they do a really good job, then I'm going out and I'm grabbing my rev ops leader, my sales enablement leader. I'm getting that value, and they're driving home like how it's going to change our organization
Yeah.
ultimately for the good for buying this thing, and it should be a needs mandate. I really believe that. And if folks aren't using it, then they better be at 200% of their number,
Right.
or else they don't really have a good excuse not to use something that's been implemented to help them hit their number. So with legislation, there I think Zoom trainings with like the SE at the technology company, those have gone really well. Creating Slack channels with the support reps at these companies just to have like questions on the fly if things aren't working, or a rep has a question. That's where I'm seeing like full adoption
Yeah.
and really good implementation is like just open comms. And there's no reason why we shouldn't have that with Slack and all the things we have today.
Yeah, because I feel like some of the tools, they drive this. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Because they're scanning and they're looking for actions and looking for tasks, and then pushing out to the reps to go, hey, it's time to do whatever. But yeah, I just back to that idea of stop before you send that out. Yeah, especially because it's going to be repetitive. What are you adding any value whatsoever? And I think you're right. If you go all the way back to discovery, and look at the needs of the different buyers, yeah, you've got to find a way to add some value. How about the reverse? I feel like a lot of us do the same with reps, right? Where we're checking in with them about the status, like we sort of get it from on high, like, hey, what's happening with these deals, and then it rolls downhill. And do you think the same thing occurs, that where we're just doing repetitions that aren't intelligent with reps on deal status?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big issue that you highlighted. I think if we go ahead and we ask the question of like, hey, what's the status of ESPN? They're supposed to close in 2 days. Are we on track? That rep for the most of the time will turn around and be like, let me get back to you. I think you're on track, and then they'll shoot the same message that you just communicated to them out to their contact,
Right.
right? So I think what we need to do as sales leaders is really instill confidence in them, and not
Yeah.
fear, and lend a hand, like lend some support. Maybe there's some executive outreach that can help to ensure that deal closes, or to cover up any blind spots. So I think it's a good call out, like that is still happening. But to the extent everyone can kind of think a little bit more before they ask that question, just like the rep to the customer, I think every sales org will be in a better
Yeah,
spot.
it strikes me, and this is relatively obvious, but that's kind of the root cause, right? If we start with a non-value added check-in, then it's going to kind of roll downhill. So I feel like, yeah, root cause. If we do a better job of checking in and saying, how do we help? What data do we need? What insight do we need for the customer? Then that's going to flow.
For sure. That's a heavy topic for me, because I've seen it on both sides. I've seen sales leaders do a really good job of supporting and asking the right leading question to get to the right deal status or forecast. I've seen it the other way. I think at the end of the day, if you as a sales rep or an AE are positioning yourself as sort of a business person and not a salesperson, when you reach out to them to ultimately get a status update or get the contract back, if you appear as a business person or a consultant, whatever the
Yeah.
word is, they're going to be more inclined to get back to you and give you an update, especially if you have an implementation plan and you have their pains, and you know you're going to solve those pains, and you also have what's going to happen, what's going to happen after that contract gets signed is crystal clear. Then I think everyone's going to be bought in to get this thing bought in and implemented and trained up. So there's a lot there to unpack, but I think ultimately, like if you come across as a business person and not a salesperson, that's the gold right
Well,
there.
it's interesting because this has come up in a lot of conversations lately, that we're either involved in the business where people are buying and selling stuff, which is your kind of, are you a sales rep or a business person? I wonder how you feel about this. From my perspective, the customers are in the business of making decisions, right? It's like deciding this solution or that solution, and I feel like making that transition to business person is, there's an opportunity for us to add value in terms of decision process. There's all this data out there that there's now committee buys. People are struggling with decisions. No decision is on the rise. when we look for ways to add value with our check-ins, that's kind of my punch here. Do you think providing support to the customer in terms of decision process, stakeholders, criteria, process, do you think that's an area we can add value?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the most critical areas to add value. I think if you're following along with your customer's journey and you're tracking them on sales nav and Twitter, you're looking at their 10Ks, whatever it may be, like that alone, if you're following their story, you can keep up with probably what's going on within those doors of that
Yeah.
building. So that's and if you it really goes back to that first call when you establish what your relationship is going to be like with that customer. That's you only get one shot at a first impression, right? So if you come in and you are not a salesy person, you're going to answer a lot of questions for them about your product, but sure as shit, you're going to have to ask them a lot of questions about their business, and those questions have to be really solid. And a lot of the times, those questions, the last couple questions that you don't want to ask because you think maybe it's too pushy, those are the questions that will determine how your buyer is looking at you. Are you a salesperson or a business
Yeah.
person? Because if you say, "Hey, is this within budget?" You talked a lot about this. That's actually closer to $250,000. Are you sure that's something that you have the authority to sign off on? That's kind of a tough question to ask. But if you ask that and they respond with, "Okay, I didn't realize that price. I'm gonna have to loop in this department over here,
Yeah.
or I'm gonna have to make sure to check in with my CFO, or yeah, that's the right budget, but we really got to bake out this plan. Here's what you're gonna have to go do." That now you're starting to talk about understanding the buying committee and the real pain and the use
Yeah.
case.
It's amazing to me how many folks are struggling with discovery still, right? And coming, and it really, you're right, it really does come down to value add, very maybe prescriptive, sort of dialed in questions. The old sort of what's keeping you awake at night, what's on your plate. It's like the customer already knows that, and all they're doing is spouting back to you what they already know. But yeah, I think the more aggressive, helpful questions for sure. You mentioned something when we were chatting a week ago about appropriate urgency. And I think that's, again, from us to the rep. When are we going to dog them? And from the rep to the customer. I like that idea. What does that mean to you?
I think Brian, I think we're developing a theme here with everything going back to that first
Yeah.
call, right? When you're establishing the timeline really for your product, do you know what the incumbent software is or technology or tool is? Do you fully understand the pains that they're having? Can you address those pains? Do you have a plan to immediately implement and solve those pains once you actually become vendor for them? So I think like you always go back to that discovery where someone highlights, the pain that they're having, and every day that passes on the day that they're supposed to implement that tool, that pain in theory continues to
Yeah.
go up, right? And so I think you always want to go back to the crux of the issue, the reason why they came inbound or the reason they picked up your call, and always tie it back to that initial, hey, we were trying to solve this. If you haven't implemented us, this pain still exists.
Yeah.
And quantifying that pain, whether it's total cost of ownership or going back to your MEDDIC notes, like you got to always bring that up as the forefront issue to get the deal
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, this is I'm just really glad to talk about it because I think it's something we all do kind of from the hip, this dog the rep, dog the customer. And it's kind of the first time that I've really had this discussion with somebody about let's really think this through and let's go back to the beginning and be very thoughtful about what we're doing and how the reps reacting to it. So yeah, hopefully I hope folks that listen, for me it's just the awareness even in my own organization to say, okay, what am I doing when I check in and what are they doing when they check in? And I think there's a real opportunity to rethink this.
For sure there is.
Cool. This is great. I really appreciate your time. You've been generous with your time and your ideas, and I think this is, like I said, it's a hot subject that I think people need to pay attention to. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course, it's early in my quarter now, so happy to share as much time with you now as opposed to March 31st. So
I'll keep
hopefully you guys.
I'll keep that in mind if we do it again. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Totally appreciate it. And as you said, it is Friday, so have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate your time.